Thank you very much, Captain Ramakrishnan. Fellow panelists, seniors, particularly Captain Sagi. Fortunately, Captain Panda is not here and does a lot of good to my nose, and fellow delegates. Thank you, Hinode, to welcome me again, Anthony. I must have done something right last time I spoke at this conference. I bring in something different because I come in from the other side of the Arabian Sea. I've lived and worked in Dubai for 12 years, and I try to benchmark somewhere what we see there and what y'all probably see here. A very proud Indian, and we do some work on the Indian coastline with trusted partners as Constellation Marine. Saying that, a little dig on the lighter side about patriotism. After being paid in pearls in the United Arab Emirates, it'll be interesting information for all of us Indians that Indian rupee was the dominant trading currency in the United Arab Emirates. I wouldn't mind getting paid as a surveyor in pearls though, saying that Indian rupees as well, and these days in dirhams, dollars, anything but get paid. Saying that, today I have an interesting presentation, and I'm going to bring in some academic views, and at the end of the presentation there is a declaration of where those examples have come from. Along with that, some photographs of our personal experience on facts versus assumptions. Being on the board of the International Institute of Marine Surveying in London, I can tell you this is the most contentious aspect of an independent surveyor's work, particularly with the second half of that phrase, assumptions. A lot of times we're asked to give opinions. The lawyers hate it because they think the legal opinion and a technical one, which we probably may come up with, always is different. Now, saying that, I don't want to get into an argument. I'm not a lawyer by far, but I would, in my presentation, point a few things about what we get out of being independent and wearing an independent hat. And the next 20 minutes, I'll try and put together some facts of both of those facts and assumptions and summarize them with some caution points. That's if this presentation and topic is of interest, otherwise the early lunch always will be served for those who are not interested. But saying that, unfortunately, Captain Ramakrishnan, I don't have videos for this particular topic that I was given to speak on, but I've got some interesting photographs of some incidents that we have attended in and around the UAE, and they're all public information. Saying that, another aspect before I get on deep into the presentation is the fact about the media aspect that I've been asked to comment on cases which were very far away from us. Those in the first 24 hours of any large incident are clearly assumptions. I mean, we wear a lot of hats, but when there is a ferry disaster in China or a lot of student lives that are lost in Korea, we have to sign off any commercial involvement to start with, and thereafter the media want to know what we think of it, what is our assumption and opinion purely on such an incident. How would the ferry capsize, and would it be an internal explosion, external explosion? There's a very intense technical background check before we are asked to go out there and talk to the customer of those media channels who's sitting on a sofa probably in his jamas. Point being that those are clearly and purely opinions. And opinions, as somebody who's in the claims business but not involved in that matter commercially and will not be. So we don't only give out independent advice, but once we contracted to do so by a P&I club or a hull and machinery underwriter or a cargo underwriter, we are bound by those instructions, and the scope of our involvement is only and and purely that of independent and nothing else but independent. And most of the time, unless we expressly asked to advise, it's actually nothing more than a fact-finding mission. And that quickly takes me to the interesting picture of a very recent incident that we were involved in. And Ian, that's public domain information. The report is on MAIB website for those who are interested. Saying that, when something like this comes across to a P&I club or a ship owner whose asset looks like that, within minutes of him thinking she's still ship-shape, the first question they ask is, how did it happen, who is responsible, what did it hit, and all that. Now, some of those are facts, but a lot of those answers come on the back of assumptions, particularly in the first few hours of something like this happening, or for that matter, in the first few hours of an independent going on board, because we are the first eyes who would go there neutrally and look at that. And a lot of times, the mistakes are made in the prelim report or in those phone calls, which are tempting to answer because you want to help, you want to be telling them a few things. But if anybody here is involved in such things, for God's sake, please expect a mute response from somebody, and it's part of one's job to not talk too much and just go there and find information first and then report on it whenever and however the time is right for. So this was on the UAE coastline. The report is out there. So if anybody wants to know more about it, we'll get there. But the picture here brings to mind one very important and interesting question, which was asked within the first minute of us boarding the vessel and shaking hands with the master. And as you can see, this is a fully laden tanker, almost on down to our marks, with condensate cargo. And the master wanted to know whether he's going to jail, whether his COC is going to be revoked, whether his employment at sea is come to, and will he ever get to see his family again? Now, all those answers come on the back of assumptions, and you have to give the answer, some answer to the master to get him on your side, and preferably give a favorable one to that, because otherwise you probably, like Arnab mentioned, cooperation from the master and crew at that initial stage is absolutely crucial. So my answer very clearly was, Captain, this is a 2 on 10. I've seen worse things, and there could be a situation where there could be some oil going in the water, some, probably from the forward tank only, and probably the Sheikh and his battalion would come and hold you by the collar and drag you in to hold you responsible. That's not happened. You could have forward stations called for, because he was right outside the channel waiting for pilot to come aboard. I said, fortunately there wasn't anybody on the forward station, so there's no loss of life. There's some metal mangled around your bow, that's about it. So it's a 2 on 10, chill out, relax, cooperate with me, I'll get you home as soon as I can, but your COC, nothing's going to be, that's your administration and your manning department that takes care of. But saying that, those are all assumptions, all vocal, all aired, but unfortunately, you cannot avoid them when you go on board. This was just between me and the master. I mean, he could have probably flipped over and gone the other way if I would have said, I don't know, anything will happen to you. You could be in jail, I don't know. I'm not here to comment on that, just tell me your facts, show me your logbook, tell me what speed you were doing. You'd probably kick me out the next minute. He said, this guy is just obnoxious. So you have to answer those simple questions initially. Saying that, a simple example, again an academic one, absolute straightforward one-liner, the bottom 20 centimeters of hull, internals, the DB tank on the port side were noted damaged or buckled during a grounding incident. You go down, you check the internals, look outside. If it's underwater, all you have is an internal structural inspection. That's factual. You saw something bent, broken, mangled, and you write it in your report. So that's a straightforward fact. A small one, it's it's mm, it's all the time done. Probably at every grounding incident, you look at what's gone wrong, and then comes the interesting bit about finding more information about where that came from. And then you say a number of discrete items. You dig more to understand what can that fact lead to. How can a series of facts be put together and become a point towards an opinion, which can easily be a series of similar incident, same incident. Whilst aground, the sounding around the port side showed evidence of clear water. That means there was depth. It wasn't. The draft of the vessel being more than the depth of the water on the port side, so to say, when you find out. And then you look at the ship's logbook, and you see maybe 6 months ago there was a similar incident where there was some kind of an inquiry. The superintendents board the vessel, and there was an incident where on the port side, really, there was something that was reported upon. Less depth, an incident report, you look at a safety meeting on board, you do find some evidence. So then you put that down, that years evidence of 6 months ago, that you have seen something that points towards that buckling on the port side inside. And also the factual statement that there is more water on the port side than the vessel's draft all along. So the place where you've seen the buckling, I mean, I'm not going to get into more depth, there's more than just putting 2 sentences together to put this, but point being, you've collected facts and you've established somewhere an opinion, or pointed towards an opinion, a technical one to that. And therefore, it is unlikely that the damage has occurred as a result of this grounding. She might still be grounded. That's one. Having damage due to that grounding is completely another. You could be sitting on soft sand and still be listed. When you float back on high tide, you could be probably absolutely fine. There would be no damage. You could get on with it. But there could be a potential claim that somebody might want to direct towards due to a previous incident. So just to put together that facts put together in a sequence do form or point towards an opinion to some extent. Now, conjecture. This is an interesting aspect where a surveyor sometimes actually in written instructions from some junior claims handlers are asked to asked to include in their report. And a conjecture is nothing but a conclusion or a proposition based on incomplete information or having no proof of that found. Now, I will not get too deep into this, but this is clearly not the role of a surveyor. You might have a lot of them asking you, what do you think happened? How did it happen? What was the master doing? On the previous photograph that you saw of the bow being mangled, if you look at the MAIB report of the vessel that hit the bow of the previous of the vessel that was showed, what the master was doing at the time of the incident is not mentioned. There are a lot of legal reasons why not, but the MAIB report is for common good of the industry where such a thing may not happen. And if a vessel hits another one at probably 10 times the speed the other was doing, you want to know why and what was the master doing in the channel when he saw such a big vessel, and that is not mentioned for whatever reason. So what I'm saying is there is a reason why they want to know this at an early stage, so probably there's a good defense strategy that can be built into their argument, but it has to be completely avoided. Another one, This was another vessel off the coast of Fujairah. Unfortunately, the company that owned it is not in existence anymore or is liquidated. But saying that, this is a tanker, looks like more of a bulk carrier without hatch covers. But the master, I boarded this vessel before the master did, after he had abandoned it on the behest of a collision. And when I offered him a telephone call to call whoever he wanted to, just let anybody know, because he just jumped in the water and he was sitting by in a tugboat all night. And the first phone call he makes is to his technical superintendent, and he's been asked questions about where are the logbooks, where are his documents, is the bridge intact, and things like that. And the guy was almost in his tears. When the Indian media was all over mentioning this vessel, and obviously the family of this master would have been worried, because this was the first 4 holes immediately in front of the accommodation. But he didn't choose to call his family first. He chose to call his company, and I could see him distressed. The point being, that's when you pull the phone back, disconnect, and then ask and dial his family's number. He is then on your side. All factual information, and I walked out of that ship with logbooks or information from logbooks, gas-free certificates, etc., which were required by the lawyers and the PNI Club and the owners to secure evidence before any other party or the Coast Guard or anybody else lays their hands on them. Point being that had I not, there would be other reasons, managers versus owners, conflicts, etc., would have kicked in, and there would probably be and the VDR, of course. So saying that, the initial few moments, absolutely crucial, but all to do with collecting facts. The sooner they are in your possession or you get a hand on them, the better it is. The more it is delayed, the more difficult it gets, the more bureaucracy builds in, lawyers take positions, and you have lesser access to lesser information. Now, saying that, coming back to conjecture, some examples. You would be tempted to mention or asked in your telephone calls, what was the master doing, or how many hours was he navigating? Was the crew out at stations for more than X number of hours? Were they probably rested? Master's competency statements, you're nobody to judge that. That's as debatable as how many crows are flying the skies of Bombay. The vessel's seaworthiness story. I mean, was she well maintained, and was there a crack in the hull before she left port, or was there a hole in the bucket, etc., etc. So these things are always asked as an opinion, as a conjecture, and by all means, if you're wearing an independence hat, it's none of your business to comment. How diplomatic an answer you can come up with is up to you, but it is definitely not something one would want to get their hands into. Saying that, there has to be a time, and there is always a time as an independent that you would be expressly asked to give an opinion, and a technical opinion. When you are giving a technical opinion, it has to be, for example, there are enough instructions that come in your mailbox saying, can you please go out there and report on the cause, nature, and extent of damage. Now, when you're giving a causation, obviously it is a kind of a technical opinion. And I don't know, we've got my fellow colleagues from Dubai here in the audience, but we always never put down cause. We always say it's a cause consideration. You can consider this. And as more and more information is available and facts are revealed, that cause consideration will have more considerations, or the consideration we had earlier may be avoided. So it's not about being slippery, but it's about being careful. But an opinion has to be compulsorily based on facts only. If you don't have a fact to support your opinion or technical opinion, you might be caught between the devil in the deep blue sea. And if you asked for God forsaken reasons to come in and give an expert opinion, only God help you. I've seen enough senior people with enough experience sweat in their pants when they're asked to come in and give an expert opinion. It's not an easy day there. Now, again, this was something of a interesting assignment we had, and we had a neutral ground on it. Again, we were amongst the first couple of people who boarded this vessel wearing gas masks. This was a vessel carrying naphtha. This happened in 2009, February. The case is over. This was the Kashmir and Asima Saman collision. We represented the state, and somebody very smartly amongst the legal friends that we have said that since you all were the first people on board, in the first session we heard somebody talk about the naval officer claiming salvage. They came up and said, since you all were the first people on board, how about claiming salvage? Because one of our tanker masters actually was instrumental in anchoring the vessel. When this happened, everybody had jumped into the water like rats. We picked up the chief officer, but we boarded the vessel along with him and dropped anchor, which was carrying naphtha cargo. Point being, once we were appointed to represent a certain party, and this was on behalf of the state, we have no business to claim. We're going there only because they instructed us to go there. We didn't go there voluntarily to help or to anchor her on our own initiative. So we dropped it as fast as the idea came up to us. But saying that, interestingly, this is one very, very important landmark cases in the history of the Dubai coastline, and this one being one, and the earlier one, there was great difficulty in finding a port of refuge for these vessels, particularly the one which happened late last year. In the first photograph I showed you, the bow angle. And I've mentioned this in Vizag, my last conference, and I hope it has gone to the right ears. And there is a bit of a welcoming gesture on the Indian coastline ports of vessels being in distress like these, because you definitely want to come up with something and want to be seen to the international community to be helping. The Erica was a typical example where she was refuged by a few ports, and she broke up and anyways messed up the coastline. And both these cases were very close to that happening, particularly the first one where both the anchors were incapacitated. She still had cargo and she had to be discharged while underway. That not being the case, I've got a couple of more slides, and I hope I'm doing all right for time. Yeah. About when our legal eagles come in, and I hope there are not many serious players in the audience, but when a case becomes litigious, that's particularly when it is more important to limit your reports and to be absolutely counting your words. And what becomes litigious? Anything that you can see damage, mangle, broken, death, injury, one thing colliding with another, even with a fixed structure. There's always going to be a apportionment of blame which will be contested legally. So it's not something that is rocket science, but you know that it's going to be, somebody's going to refuse liability or try to reduce his liability by appointing somebody really smart in the legal fraternity. So when that comes up and you're landing up with a certain sizable damage to report upon, that's the cue to limit your opinions. Your reports got to be nothing but factual. More important, the person writing it, we have this concept of a guardian angel in our organization. No report goes out without being vetted by a colleague who's got equal or better experience. Point being, that person has to look at it from an absolute pragmatic perspective. And to those clients who ask for certain things written into a report, an independent report will be shot on its knees the moment there's a smell of bias in it. So if you, Mr. Correspondent or some ship owners here, if you are expecting your P&I surveyor or hull and machinery surveyor to protect your interest, it's never going to be that. you're not there to protect anybody's interests. We're there to report facts, collect facts, and your lawyer will protect your interests. He's appointed by you, and he's got the right to information. But there are enough misunderstandings out there, particularly amongst the junior claims handlers or some shipowning fraternity, where our PNI surveyor is boarding, so our PNI surveyor will take care of our master and tell him what to do. So it's a little bit of it's growing. I'd say that this trend is on its increase. There are more and more people expecting that in our fraternity. So I'm coming up to my last slide with a bit of I've already talked about the first one, protect our members' interest, and I can show you enough messages coming from either the correspondent or, if you scroll down the chain down, written by IG Club claim handlers, saying protect our interest, our members' interest is to be safeguarded, or things. I mean, you can go up and ask them, and go a little higher, one rung above the seniority, and they'll say, no, you're not there to protect the interest, you're there to tell the club what actually happened. We'll take care of our member, and our legal department, all the lawyers will protect whatever has to be protected. And yes, the conclusion bit. The conclusion bit has to be left to the lawyers. I would raise a small example. I have mentioned this in the past. I'll take an example of this bottle. Now, when we go out for joint surveys and A person is representing a party independently and a B party is represented by a B independent, it's like us reporting on this bottle. I just turn it around once, right? And here, our panelists, let's say, are representing a PNI club to report on the facts on what he sees on this bottle, and the rest of you all maybe another one. So when I'm looking at this and reporting and being asked that I have no access as a charterer, let's say, to look at all aspects of the logbook, etc., and to report facts. So we'll report and say that we have gone for the survey and not seen any label. What do you agree, sir? On it. There is no red mark or any indication of that on this bottle. Versus y'all being owners, PNI club representatives, who would report your side of the fact and say there is a red label which mentions the word clear written vertically downwards to up. With that much precision, you would report in your. Both those facts are absolutely correct, but they're different facts, and they can be contested upon, and most often than not, both the reports are on the table when there is an arbitration or a legal proceeding. They both looked at it independently for the purpose of what it is. So the most important aspect when you're doing that is to mention exclusions and to say that we did not have access to the other side of the bottle, so we are not able to comment on what was written on that side. Once that happens, you have automatically taken care of most of the questions, tomatoes, rotten eggs, etc., in words thrown at you as an independent professional, at times, irrespective of your seniority, of your this thing, because you have to mention about the exclusions to be protecting your own side of the story. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I hope I've driven a point home, and please do not enforce upon or write us as independents to comment about our opinions. If we stick to facts, we're most comfortable. We will telephone you all, or send a confidential note if it is required to tell you something that is outside the scope of our work, but it will not be mentioned in our report. But thank you very much for listening. Thank you.